context of how you make those things happen is a waste of your time. That's why if you tell yourself, or anyone tells you, hey man, just slow down, right? I can miss just as slow as I can hit. And I can certainly miss just as fast as I can hit, right? Yes, so the speed is not the determining factor in these things, right? Fast and slow is completely relative. What might be fast for Ash might be super slow for one of you. And what might be slow for Ash might be super fast for me. It is too based on the individual. But we focus entirely on going fast or going slow. But that's not actually what we mean. What we mean is what's causing us to be fast or slow, right? Typically that comes down to one thing, and that's efficiency, right? The thing that tends, and we see this all the time, when guys say slow down and get your hits, what they're really trying to tell you is, hey man, you need to be a little more careful with every shot you make in order to achieve those hits.
Exactly.
Right? You need to start restructuring your mental
Slow down,
process.
get your hits. What's that mean?
All right? You need to stop thinking about going fast and going slow, because those two things in and of themselves don't mean shit. All right? You can go just as fast as you want to and score all alphas. Right? And now the speed doesn't hold you back. Right? If I take Josh here and I put him on the line, yeah, that's right, square up. Right? And I put him on the line and I'm like, hey man, shoot as fast as you possibly can. Right? What does that have to do with his ability to hit? Zero.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with his ability to hit the target, right? But, hey man, I want you to see exactly what you need to see and score me the most alphas as urgently as you can. Well, now it's changed, right? I haven't said fast or slow, but I've told him to give me the best hits possible, and I put the priority on the points or the hitting over the speed of the exercise, right? You need to stop thinking about speed and time as the deciding factor. I'll tell you guys, one of the biggest things, Tim and I see it all the time in matches, especially in like his practical performance class, right, where we shoot a stage in it. The first question that pretty much gets asked after every run is, hey man, how fast do you run that in? That is the wrong question, because it does not matter. I never know how fast other shooters shoot a stage, because it doesn't matter to me. It's focused on the wrong thing. I can shoot a stage 2 to 3 seconds slower than everyone in my squad and still whoop everyone's ass because I will outpoint them. The question you should be asking is, what do the hits look like? What do the points look like? Right? Because right now I can tell you, we can ask every single person here, hey man, how fast did you shoot that? Well, I shot, 27 rounds in 5 seconds. Cool. You should have the best score, but that's not how it always works out.
Right.
The guy that might shoot 11 rounds, but he scores all alphas every single time is going to outpoint you, right? It's about the quality of the shooting, not the speed of the shooting, right? You guys have probably all heard the adage, you can't miss fast enough to win, right? Again, slivers of truth surrounded by bullshit, right? But at its core, that's correct. If you throw nothing but garbage hits out there, you cannot win. You cannot win. We've seen it try and play out, especially nowadays where PCC is such a dominant division. I have watched guys go on a stage and run through an entire stage and score maybe of 24 targets, I think it was. He scored about 7 alphas the entire stage out of a possible 48 alphas. Then I watched a guy who was basically on oxygen walk a stage and score nothing but alphas. Who do you think won? Right? Exactly, which was pretty demoralizing, I'm not going to lie. But
it looked good for the gram.
Right? But our focus is too much on the wrong things. We need to start focusing a little bit more on quality of our shots as opposed to volume, right, or speed of our shots. Don't get me wrong. There's a time where you got to lay the hammer down, right? But only if you can score the points at that speed.
There's
right?
a blend, and not to interject, but there's time associated with every point that you shoot, right? When there's accuracy at stake. So alphas, charlies, and deltas. and this is something I truly cover, and we get into like the science of like stages and stage planning and the science of the hit factor scoring and things like that in my 2-day class, but I'll give you just a little heads up on that now. So like every Charlie that you shoot, there's time associated with it. Every Delta that you shoot, there's time associated with it. There's no real time associated with the Alpha because that's what we should be shooting anyhow, right? So just like in IDPA, and who is familiar with IDPA scoring, right? So you got down zeros, which add no more time because you're shooting as accurate as you can in the speed that it takes you, right? Down ones cost you what? A whole second. And down threes cost you 3 seconds. So we know because of the equation of time equals points there, that it's in our best interest to try to collect as many down zeros as possible. Otherwise, we're adding either 1 second or 3 seconds. Or dang, if you get a miss, now you're adding 5 seconds, you know, to your time. In USPSA, we don't associate time with the points that we shoot. We think they are completely separate entities. Right? So we're like, well, we're just going to collect as many points as we can, but try to do it in as fast a time as possible. Except that if we start to associate time with the points down that we shoot as well, we'd start to have a better understanding of where that, dare I say, that speed control between between speed and accuracy or time and accuracy comes into play. One of those being that with time associated to every point down, in this case, Charlies. What does a Charlie cost you?
2 points.
It costs you 2 points. What's it cost you in time? Does anybody even know?
0.3, 0.4 seconds.
Right. It kind of depends. I'll tell you right now, like in USPSA, it's determined by whoever sets the highest hit factor, right? The highest points per second, right? Which is the overall hit factor on the stage. And hit factor is nothing more than a calculation of the points earned or the points collected on a stage divided by the time that it took them to shoot those points, right? So we get a points per second, which is exactly what hit factor is. And whoever collects the highest points per second then is the determining factor of how much time is associated with a point lost. On average, and this is on average, this is not an absolute, so don't write it as an absolute. But on average, based on if we collected 5 points for every single trigger press, right? And we press the trigger once a second, a 5 hit factor stage or a 5 hit factor, right, would cost us, like Charlies are costing us about 3.5 tenths of a second or almost 4.4 of a second. So now you got to start to make the determination, am I able to make up those points faster than I can shoot the 0.4 down? Or is it in my best interest to let the sight settle just a little bit more to ensure that I'm effectively shooting higher points because I don't have that time to lose? On something like this balance assessment drill, everybody has the exact same 5 seconds of opportunity to collect as many points as they can. So therefore, it's in your best interest like to try to collect as many points as you can, not just shoot as many rounds as you can, because every single time that you shoot a Charlie or worse, you shoot a Delta, you're costing yourself time that could have been used better to collect a higher number of points, right? So if a Charlie is worth, on average, again, about 0.35 to 0.4 of a second, a Delta is worth double that amount. Double that amount. So a 0.4 deficit on a Charlie is now a 0.8 deficit on a Delta, meaning you basically almost gave back an entire second to whatever the drill or whatever the stage was because you chose to pull the trigger and you chose to aim poorly or ineffectively on the target. But all we hear is 5 seconds. We're going to just let it rip. I have to go faster. But the question we should be asking ourselves is how much sight refinement or sight confirmation do I need to see allowable to what the scoring system is, right? So on string 1, you're given every opportunity, right, to collect as many points because it's minute of the entire target. But it should not be shoot to minute of the entire target because I don't want the dot or the sights dancing around so much that now every single time I'm pressing the trigger, I'm giving up the opportunity to collect alphas. So there needs to be a margin of acceptability visually. Each string, that margin gets a little bit smaller, a little tighter, right? On string 1, I'll tell you what my margin of acceptability looks like for me. And then you guys do with this what you will. But my margin of acceptability is I am willing to accept that the dot or the sights are going to dance high, low, left, right, and acceptable is going to be someplace from about here to here, here to here. I'm not using the entire target. I'm not using the entire target. But what am I saying is acceptable? Are Charlies acceptable?
Close Charlies.
Close Charlies are acceptable, but when I'm trying to collect as many points as possible, I'm utilizing, right, a sight confirmation level that says, you know what, all I'm simply trying to do with, let's say, a red dot gun or a dot pistol is I'm saying that obviously I'm looking to this spot right here on the target. But if I see the dot lift and then fall and then lift and then fall and then lift and then fall and then lift and then fall, are all of those acceptable times and opportunities to press the trigger?
Yes.
Is it pretty erratic in what it's doing?
Absolutely.
Absolutely it is. I'm still trying to confirm enough sight management and enough grip to keep the sights lifting and returning within that margin of acceptable, right? Why? Because I can possibly bleed a couple of points off and bleed 3 or 4 Charlies on it as long as I'm still visually accepting that the dot is moving in an acceptable area of the target. That's it. Now, are deltas unacceptable? Well, you guys just saw me shoot my very first shot out of the gun was what? It was a delta because I rushed the draw and did not have the grip established yet to try to buy back some time to shoot an extra round or two. Where's it going to come from? I can't just magically rip the splits in 0.15 if my limit is about 0.17 to 0.18, and acceptably seeing the dot lift and return in an area on the target, right? So I got to buy that time back from someplace. I chose to say, you know what? I'm going to give up 2 or 3 tenths on the draw to try to buy back an extra shot. But it didn't work out. It didn't quite work out because I didn't have the grip needed and established for the first shot. So the very first opportunity to collect 5 points turned into, well, I only collected 1 point. But if you probably went back and looked at just the split times, you'd probably notice from shot 1 to shot 2, that was also the longest deviation in my split time. Once I corrected the grip, I got the gun back on track, and then what happened? For 17 of the 18 rounds that I fired, I watched the dot lift and return every single time. So able to call my shots when the dot just begins its next lift on the target. And so as I'm watching the dot lift, every single one of those is acceptable. But I chose to then shorten my margin of acceptability on the target based on what? The very first shot that I called bad out of the gun, and I made a correction. What I didn't do is I didn't lose my collective mind and go, well, the first one was sloppy. Let's follow it up with more sloppy work. Let's go faster instead of let's control myself to make sure that I'm collecting all the hits I possibly can, all the points I can for every subsequent trigger press, right? You got to be able to make, and shot calling, as we learned yesterday, and hopefully became very much masterful of, like Lori made some great decisions, especially even on her third string, to watch the gun and feel yourself starting to get really tense and go, nope, that's not good enough. Let me back off and then I'll fire that shot. That all is a byproduct of great shot calling. You being more aware of your ability to control emotion and control tension on the pistol, and then making better decisions. So the shot call on the bad delta is what it then told me, you know what? My margin of error goes from this would have been totally acceptable had I fired that first shot here versus here. Do you think that might have changed my strategy for the next 17 rounds?
Absolutely.
I might have then said, you know what? I collected 3 on the first one, and I'm well within my margin of error. I can accept the sights to move around just a little bit more. Perhaps now I shoot 3 more rounds. Well, where'd I buy those 3 more rounds at? 200s here, 200s here, 200s here, 200s here. Hey, okay, now I've bought back a tenth. 1 more shot gives me an extra 200s. Now I bought an extra shot. Out of 17 rounds, if I shorten the sequence of firing by 200ths more. Maybe instead of shooting 18 splits, I shoot 16 splits. I try to go as fast as I can visually confirm the sight's lifting and returning. I buy back 3 more shots, but only because everything was in an easier margin of error, right? Or a margin of acceptability. But because one shot was outside that margin of acceptability, I immediately said, nope, that's not good enough. I now need to have the dot lifting and returning in this area and only this area to maximize point collection. But on the first string, this is like the margin of error becomes a little wider. Why? Because I can get away with a little bit more, right? We would call this more of like confirmation 2. You're not confirming the dot and it lifts and it returns back to a single dot, and then it lifts and returns back to a single dot. You're confirming just a streak of information. On string 1 on this exercise on the balance assessment, that's your opportunity to play with sight confirmation. How much can the sights move and still get acceptable hits on the target? This is your opportunity to kind of explore. Now on string 2, you're a little more stringent on things. It's alphas and only alphas. But alphas and only alphas are what counts for score. Anything outside the A, though, does it take anything away? Not yet. I will tell you, my margin of acceptability now turns into something that looks like this. I still want to maximize movement in the sights, right? So now it's, let's say, a confirmation 2 1/4, right? A confirmation 2 1/4. A confirmation 1 is almost like what we would see at 3 yards, 5 yards. I may not be looking for color in the dot at all. I'm looking for just, is the gun kind of anchored to a spot on the target? Maybe my hands, what we used to call backplating or rear sight anchoring or anything like that. That's kind of confirmation 1. That's like the most gross confirmation level there is. I don't mean gross nasty. I mean gross like
unrefined.
Right, grossly unrefined, right? Confirmation 2 is where I'm looking for a streak of color or a controlled streak of color into it, and again, an acceptable level on the target, okay? So even though I'm widening my margin slightly more than the A zone, why? Because if I can control the gun into that area, I'm still then saying, you know what, I'm maximizing points collection at a slightly higher rate of speed if I had to put a term to it, okay? So I'm saying it's okay to possibly bleed a Charlie outside of that. But I shouldn't have shots all the way out here. If I'm shooting shots all the way out here, I've allowed myself visually to not see enough information. I'm too loose visually on the sights. So I need to rein that in a little bit. How do you rein that in? Well, grip for one, and most importantly, visual discipline. Like if you're pressing the trigger faster than you can see the sights, then that is, you are now going, if I had to put it, you're going too fast, right? And that's the byproduct of it. I'm going too fast. I'm going faster than I can visually perceive what the sights are doing. Your speed control is your ability with your eyes to stay disciplined. I need this level of acceptability, or I allow this level of margin or acceptability, or I really need to shrink things in. On string 3, I'm going to base a little bit on, so this was my margin here for string 2. If everything is well within the margins of string 2 and I'm well within the A zone, then I allow that to now be my guide to say, hey, even though you're allowing that margin of error, and it's a little wider than the A zone, nothing should change because, Tim, you're capable of keeping the dot dancing and lifting in, like, within the confines of that A. But if for some reason I've got a higher probability of shooting shots outside the A on both sides here, now I tell myself, I need a little bit more. I need a little bit more visual refinement. So now the visual refinement turns into something like that. Now you would say, Tim, that's narrower than the A zone. You're absolutely right, it is. Can I still see the sights moving? I'm not looking for a confirmation 3. Confirmation 3 is kind of what we equate to, I need a perfect dot, or I need perfect equal height, equal light, like with iron sight pictures. I'm not looking for perfect, but I definitely, that margin of acceptable became a lot smaller because the risk is greater. But Tim, why would you give yourself half the A zone instead of all of the A zone, because I also need to I need to compensate for that margin of error that's going to occur. If the sights slightly move outside of that, I'm still okay. Do the sights move slightly out of that because of bad grip? Or do the sights slightly move out of that during the trigger press because I get aggressive with the trigger? It could be both, right? We don't really know. And at that level of speed or that level of aggression, like I need to be able to compensate for those things. The finer the point is I choose on the target, your margin of error is going to be about 3.5 times the size of that. 3.5 times greater than the size of that. So if I say on string 1, my margin of error is here, 3.5 times the size of that now becomes about, like I said, minute of target. Is shooting a delta acceptable on string 1? Could be. Right, kind of depends. How many of those are deltas every time you're pressing the trigger? Is 1 out of a string of 18 acceptable? I'd say, yeah, absolutely. You know, are 2 or 3 Charlies acceptable on string 1? Sure. The thing is, we get wrapped up on like, oh God, I shot a delta. Oh, that hurts the soul. What is a delta?
1 point.
It's 2 Charlies. That's all it is. If you are willing to say, you know what, I'll accept 2 Charlies on that, but you're saying, but a delta is absolutely unacceptable, you're doing yourselves a disservice. You got to understand, they're just points down, right? Or points not earned. But if I don't earn 5 points on that first trigger press, well, then I need every subsequent trigger press to collect as many valuable points as possible. That'd have been no different than me shooting 19 rounds instead of 18, but shooting 19 rounds and shooting 2 Charlies and the rest alphas. Scores exactly the same. But most of us would say 2 Charlies, that's not bad. But we see 1 delta out of that and we go, oh, that was horrible. No, you got to stop looking at it that way. They're just points collected or points not collected. Okay? But those margins have to change every string. And you let whatever your previous performance is, I don't want to say completely dictate, but you let it kind of navigate you to, okay, if I was way out of control on the first string, I need to rein that in quite a bit more. But if you're way in control on the first string, guess what? It shouldn't change. It shouldn't change your balance. You're going to change your margins just a little bit to account for the fact I need more alphas because alpha is the only thing that score on the second one. And on the third one is I need all the alphas because anything outside the A is going to take alphas away. There's nothing worse than like I shot 8 rounds on the third string, yes, and you go down range and 2 of those are outside and you're like, now all of a sudden, now I've got 6. But you really don't have 6. You fired 6 alphas, but you had 2 Charlies, 2 takes away 2. So you go from a potential 40 points, now turns into 20 points. Ooh, that hurts, right? So again, the margins themselves need to change. Your level of acceptability needs to change. 3.5 times the size of something here now becomes what? All A's. The difference between the sight confirmation here is now, instead of the sights dancing this much back and forth, you're looking to control that movement to where the impacts, again, are just based on the lift, and you're waiting to see, just a little bit more patient to allow the dot to lift, but then you're going to allow it to return and be just a little bit more steady before you press the next shot. But that level of confirmation should not equate to, on the first string you shot 19 rounds, the second string you shot 17 rounds, but then all of a sudden, like for all the marbles, the third string, I'm going to slow it down and shoot 6 rounds. This is the same thing that happens when we shot the group exercise yesterday to begin. Who slowed down, artificially slowed down their group shooting on one of the 3 strings, but then realized they got worse results than if they had just shot to the visual confirmation that they needed to. I mean, hell, I did it. I proved it right to you just in a demonstration, taking just a little bit more time to aim harder. There's that whole slow down to get your hits. Did I get my hits? No. I just slowed down. I slowed down to make the same mistake I would have made had I tried to go faster and speed up. So just like AJ's saying, you cannot equate speed, slowing down or speeding up as to, okay, I'm going faster or I'm going to collect a higher level of points if I slow down to get my hits or I speed up and lose more. It's all about the sight confirmation, visual confirmation levels. Those confirmation levels also equal how I need to press the trigger, right? If I need more valuable sight confirmation, guess what I need to do with the trigger to maintain that level of sight confirmation? I've got to be gentler on the trigger. I can't snatch at the trigger, right? They're not mutually exclusive. They have to work together, and they're on a scale. I need more sight confirmation. I also need more trigger confirmation. I need less sight confirmation. I can get away with a little bit more or a little less trigger confirmation. And then the guide for that is your vision. Your vision is what tells you whether it's okay to press the trigger at that level or not. But the one thing that then has to remain an absolute constant is your grip on the pistol. It doesn't change. For many of you, I watched that, and I'm sure AJ did too. For many of you, it did change. We watched you grip the gun with completely different pressures on the pistol when those margins changed. Oh, I need a tighter margin on the third string. You started gripping the gun a little looser so that you got a little bit more trigger control, but at the same time, then your recoil management went to shit. So now every single time you press the trigger more carefully, the gun lifted and returned drastically different than it did on the first string when you were gripping the hell out of it. Why aren't you gripping the hell out of it to shoot the more refined shots that you need? That's the one thing that cannot change. You don't change your grip at 25 yards to shoot 25-yard B8s differently than you would grip the gun to rip it at six rounds into a bill drill at 7 yards. The grip structure you apply to the gun has to remain constant, 100% constant. It cannot change. It is unwavering. The only thing then that tells you whether or not it's okay to speed up or slow down or see more or be allowed to see less is going to be what I visually perceive while having that grip. The structure can't change.
I have a question, Tim.
Please.
Take this as a grain of salt. Why can't top-level shooters agree on that concept? Your grip has to stay the same.
Everybody's got their own.
It drives me nuts. As a new shooter, I love to absorb information, but it drives me nuts that some of these, what I consider core concepts, are so different between high-level shooters. It's interesting.
Is there somebody at a top-level shooter telling you to change your grip on the gun when you're shooting 25 yards?
Grip, especially on confirmation level, and Mike Seeklander and Rob Latham both said they change their grip as they go through a stage. But Mike and Rob said they actually end up, the longer the stages, they start at a grip level and they start to actually squeeze more and more throughout the stage, which I thought was interesting. Mason said he absolutely changes his grip based on confirmation level, and you should.
Is that potentially a way of compensating for potential?
It doesn't matter. It's just high-level shooters. Just
I
say
can't.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Right, no, I
like your stance anyways. I'm the guy. I don't know how to change my grip, so I keep the same grip. And it's what I practice most in dry fire is how do I have a real consistent grip all the time. It's just as a new shooter, it's sometimes interesting that there's so many different philosophies on what I would consider a core concept.
Yeah, my personal philosophy on it is I want the gun to be as consistent as possible. Consistent as possible then allows me to visually start reading and understanding and comprehending information when the gun is communicating to me. Right? So it's like if the gun is talking to me visually, right? It's giving me information through the sights. It's like gripping the gun softer in order to fire a more let's say a more accurate shot or a more precise shot at 25 yards. Almost as like, okay, now I'm giving the gun a megaphone to start screaming that information because I'm seeing a lot more movement in the sights. But then when I want to go faster or more aggressive, it's like I'm stuffing a sock in its mouth to shut it up so that it's not giving me as much information. Why on earth would I want to communicate with somebody that way, like in person, right? I know there's people that we probably talk to we'd like to do that with, but for the most part, we don't. We want a consistent source of communication back and forth. I want that gun to remain as consistent with me and be able to communicate with me consistently. So I do not change my grip on the gun.
Aaron, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I don't want to put you on this, like, have you communicate for a third party, but if I understand right, Mason or Rob or somebody was advocating that depending on visual confirmation, softening or strengthening grip
So
pressure.
Rob and Mike didn't advocate based on visual confirmation. They said that when you start a stage, grip the shit as much as you can, and then once you start calling your shots, if you realize you're not doing more, you should start to squeeze harder and harder throughout a stage.
As if maybe you don't have a good grip on the draw? Or
They said they
right?
do it. I'm assuming they have a good grip.
Well, so herein lies the problem. Start and grip the gun as hard as you can. Then as you continue through a stage, grip the gun harder.
If you're already as hard
How
as you
is
can.
that possible?
Yeah, if I was at 100%,
No, I
can't do
understand.
I'm just a new
120.
guy learning.
No,
Right.
I understand. And I'm 100% with Tim on this.
Are
Honestly,
you
I'm a
not
little
120%?
surprised.
Why aren't you as 100% with him? as
You're
you
like
could
my
be?
wife. Why don't you love me 110%? Because 100 is the only number. You can't go above 100.
No extra credit.
Period. It is true. 100% is 100%.
Let's not do girl math here.
Yeah, I don't. I would not advocate that, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to give you a very specific example. Tim already hit on it. I watch people constantly change their grip from when they shoot at 25 yards versus when they shoot at 7 yards. Right? When you go to 25 yards, you start doing things with the gun that you never would do at 7 yards. It kind of looks like this.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're trying to focus on the refinement and the accuracy of the shot. But then I put you at 7 yards and you're like, right? You're trying to make that thing go cyclic, right? The problem is, why are you having trouble at 7 yards keeping all your hits inside the A zone? Well, number one, you're applying a completely different amount of pressure and structure to the gun for a different solution, and that's not going to work out for you, right? The name of the game, is, as we see it, is consistency, right? We've been talking about consistency for 2 days. So to me, I want that grip as consistent as possible. I want the structure as consistent as possible. I talked to you guys about gun jumping yesterday. That's a consistency problem, right? I want everything. Hell, I take it to the next level. I don't shoot other types of ammos through my gun because that consistency change from one loading to another loading jacks my timing up. There's no consistency there. That surprises me about Mike because he and I have had that conversation. And
Mike's been one of my biggest mentors.
I love Mike to death.
I do too.
I was just talking to him a couple weeks ago, and he was very strong advocate about, and he said this multiple times. When you're shooting a stage, you are going to sometimes have to increase your grip throughout the stage. The
So
pressure.
I think what he's getting at, and this might be just a slight misunderstanding or miscommunication, is, come over here. AJ, continue saying what you're saying. I want you just to shake my hand. Give me a firm handshake.
Good job, everybody.
Give me a firm handshake.
Words.
good work.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Continue.
Yes, I understand what you're
like
getting to.
sports.
The longer you
No, I don't
squeeze,
like
the harder it
sports.
gets.
Exactly. So you will start to slowly release your grip, and then you got to remind yourself, no, I got to grip harder. Good, there. And I think that's more of what he's trying to get at is,
maybe not
like,
understanding the
right.
terminology. I just thought it was
So here's the thing, right, with Mike. Mike's got a mantra that he preaches, right, on his Make Ready. Does he tell? I'm sure he's told you what his mantra, right? Grip the gun, see the sights. Grip the gun, see the sights. Grip the gun, see the sights. I tried to use that mantra for my own Make Ready. It's not enough. For me, grip the gun, but see the sights. See the sights what? See the sights over here, see the sights up here. That didn't tell me enough. For me, grip the gun, manage the sights. And so my conscious effort when I'm shooting a stage, even on my Make Ready and even through the stage, is I have to have a conscious effort to maintain grip on the gun and manage the sights. Like, I do not believe in Steve Anderson's, like you're gonna learn to shoot to a subconscious level and then you just let the conscious mind do the other, like focus on the stage and things like that. I can't.
It's just body mechanics.
I can't. My conscious effort is always on grip the gun and manage the sights because that's what's most important to ensure good hits on the target.
No, I totally agree with that.
So
I just thought it was interesting that top level shooter, maybe they can explain it differently. And then Mason was all about confirmation level. He talked about you use a pinky to open mayonnaise jars, and when you're going to be doing a 3-yard field drill, if you will, that you may not need as much pressure like opening mayonnaise jar. When you're at 25 yards, you're trying to press, be very consistent, and your grip may change. I think that's really
So
top
do you
level
think
shooter
like
talk.
regular
But people
practice
have
will make that
mastered so
a
much
little
of their
bit easier
mechanics
to get
that
that
those nuances
in the-
make sense. But for the average shooter,
Yeah.
maybe it's
I think you're setting up a shooter for failure in a way because you're like, oh, what do you mean? My grip confirmation changes based on my trigger confirmation, changes because of my vision confirmation? Like, wait, what?
I always try to bounce things off of my mind is, am I a beginner golfer or am I Tiger Woods? And how I improve things is going to change based on my competency level. Like Tiger Woods, how he's going to change his golfing is way different than you, right?
Well, you think about, what's his name, McGrath, Phil,
doesn't.
Mickelson?
Phil Mickelson, right? Phil talks about, like, there was a video just not too long ago that Phil talked about, like, oh, he can look at the lie and he'll understand the wind and the humidity conditions, and if he chokes down on the club 3 inches will result in a 7-yard loss on his right, and he swings irons with less force than he does his woods, right, or his drivers, and it's all based on these other things. And he's like, oh, and if you're on a tight lie or if you're on a deep lie, then like for the average golfer, it's like, if you tried to focus on all of those nuances, like, how about we just get a consistent swing first, right? Exactly. And I'm telling you right now, like, even shooting at a high level, I'm a simpleton. If I can maintain the same grip pressures on the gun and I allow my vision confirmation to then give me a variance in, like, what my trigger confirmation needs to be, and I can equate those two things, 25-yard shot, I need to see a still dot, that means I'm going to have to prep and press the trigger versus just slapping through it, then so be it.
Yeah, I just don't think I'm smart enough to figure out how to change my grip all the time, and also manage visual focus, and also manage X's and entries from the position, and also manage calling your shots. I'm just not smart enough. I'm just not.
Right. Simplify it.
You can get a technique, right? And you can get a technique, and it will work right now. However, it will not be consistent. That's where the repetition comes from. There is no substitute for repetition. None. Right? Now, you can make deliberate focus, right, in your own practice, speed up that process of myelination. I'm going to give you guys an example. Does anyone play instruments or played instruments in like a band or anything when they were a kid? Right? So, if you look at, like, classically trained violinists, right, or kids that are learning a piece of music, or you were learning a piece of music, you start the piece of music and you go and you make a mistake, right? Let's say you're, halfway through your sheet music, you make a mistake. Do you stop and go immediately to the beginning of the song and start over? No, you rep those 2 or 3 bars that you messed up over and over and over again, and you start deliberately. You're like, okay, I play this exactly like this, then you ramp it up a little bit, then you play it at speed, and once you've been able to accomplish that task, you either move on from that point, or you start over and make sure that you've fully ingrained those 3 bars or 4 bars into your process, right? That's how we create skill. One of the big problems we do as shooters, and I see this in dry fire a lot, right? I'll give you an example. We talked about refinement and repetition yesterday. There's an exercise in there. It's basically a vice pres 6 reload 6, right? 3 different targets. Click, 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 reload, click, 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 click. And if you're like me, the part where that falls apart is always the reload. But what individuals will do, and we do this in live fire too all the time, right? We're having a problem with our draw, and we will then shoot bill drills to work on our draw. Well, I don't need to shoot a bill drill to work on my draw. If the reload in a 6 reload 6 is the problem, I don't need to draw the gun, press the trigger 6 times, then work a reload in the beginning, right? Because the problem is the reload. So I need to rep the reload, fix that problem, then I can go back to the start of the song, which is the timer and the draw, and then I can make sure that I fully ingrain that into my process, right? But that's the point of deliberate practice or purposeful practice. We need those things, all right? So many of us spend too much time working. I'll give you an example of a stage, right? We shoot a stage. We make a mistake in that stage. And then what do most people do? Well, I've got the whole stage. I'll just shoot the whole stage over and over and over again. That doesn't work, right? You've wasted so much time and energy running the rest of the stage that you didn't make a mistake instead of fixing the mistake deliberately. Tim and I, in our practice sessions, when we do get to practice together, if we're doing some stage work, we'll run a stage fully, basically twice. One time in the beginning to get a baseline. Then we find our mistake, right, or where we can gain some more, and we will rep that one array or that one little section. It might just be the first shot getting out of the position, right? Oh, I could have, I stood here and I shot 2 rounds at this target, and then I hesitated and then I moved out. Well, I need to work about, let's see if I can shoot this on the move moving out. I'm not going to run the whole stage over and over for 2 shots that I'm concerned with. All right, let me try and just get off the beep and start moving. Beep, boom, boom. Cool, let me do it again.
Yep. Now rep it to learn it and myelinate that into something that like, oh, that was really uncomfortable, then turns into something, oh man, I can do that on demand every time. You fix the issue. Right? We call that level of learning or that type of learning chunking. It's chunking information, right? And not to break into anything else, like, but AJ's preaching the truth there. We see it a lot, especially with multiple target transitions or drill where you're like, I'm going to work on transitions today. And so you'll set up an array with 4 targets or 5 targets, and you're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. But you didn't see something on shot 10. But instead of just fixing target 5, which would be shots 9 and 10, you go all the way back to the beginning. I have to do it again. I have to do it again. I have to do it again. So now to fix a problem of one shot that you visually aren't seeing enough information, you're now wasting 10 rounds of ammunition to get there. But then the problem becomes, even if you fix that, you're so focused on fixing that that you let another mistake crop up. Right? In racing, we used to call that term pushing the problem around the track. Right? Somebody would overdrive turn 2 in a 10-turn racetrack. They'd overdrive turn 2. Either they're under braking or they're not accelerating out of turn 2 fast enough. So then you spend some time, like you do another lap, and you come in, and the only fix for the driver is get into turn 2. You're going to brake to this braking point right here. You're going to get hard on the brakes. You're going to breathe off the brakes, steer the car in, accelerate out, and we finally fix turn 2. But because now they've got this newfound speed through turn 2, what do you think happens to turn 3?
Jack it up.
Exactly. So now they've pushed the problem someplace else on the track. And eventually you've got to push the problem all the way around the track until you push it off out of pit row, and now you can do perfect laps. But pushing the problem off the track is really, I mean, that's a long way about just fixing one thing. All right, so then we tell drivers all the time, like, just go back and turn 2. If I'm on a track by myself with somebody, we don't drive another lap all the way around if we can help it. We'll fix that one problem, make a U-turn, come all the way back, and then fix that problem again. Make a U-turn, come back, fix that problem again. Just to work on that one chunk of information. We fix that, then it becomes, hey, you know what, Ash, don't change anything else about turn 3. You're doing great on turn 3. Turn 2, you're going to carry a little bit more speed, but you fix that problem. Trust that the car's going to be a little bit faster into turn 3. You're going to stay the same braking, the same turn in, the same acceleration, and everything. Presto changeo, we've now fixed everything, and we didn't waste 3/4 of a tank of fuel. We didn't burn up the brakes. We didn't burn up the tires, and we didn't spend 30 laps to fix one issue. We spent 20 reps working one corner before we put that back together. In shooting, right, it's stop doing a 10-round exercise to fix one problem. Stop and isolate that one issue. Don't shoot 10 rounds where you only need 1 round or 2 rounds to fix the issue. How about spend those 10 rounds doing 10 reps of that one chunk of information to fix that one thing? You think that's way more purposeful than spending 100 rounds to get 10 reps fixing that one problem? Most of us don't do that, though.
IDPA practice on Thursdays, because sometimes they'll set up a mock stage, and then you end up, because there's so many there, I understand why we do it, but you'll have, say it's a busy night where there's 15 or 20 of us, and then you come up and you do it once, and you're like, okay, that's the first time for the day. This is the first time I shot since Sunday, and it's Thursday, and you come up and you do pretty good. And then you come up and then you have one bad array, and there's 5 or 6.
And you're like, I would like to shoot that array or that entry just over and over again.
And then you do right that time, and of course it's the exact same thing you said. I've done it. I think a bunch of us have done it, and I think that's one of the problems that I struggle with sometimes in practice, in our IDPA practice sessions, because sometimes I'm like, look, I'd be better off doing this on my own on Sunday.
Yes, that's 100%.
You know, a lot of times Ken catches me out here, and he's like, why the hell aren't you coming to practice? I'm like, well, first,
because practice isn't really practice.
Yeah, because practice is like mock stage playing and stuff like that. And so, so it's great, it's fun, but a lot of times I'm like, I need to do other things.
This is the
I need work to work on other things.
caveat emptor, right, to working with a training partner. Or many of us, dude, I mean, why do we get into shooting anyway? It's a social aspect. We love to shoot. We love hanging out with, with like-minded individuals, so then we practice with 4 or 5 people. Like, oh man, I'm going to go out to the range on Sunday. Josh, Dustin, Ron, you guys in? Oh, hell yeah, we're all in. Well, then the problem is you've turned what could have been really purposeful practice and training has now turned into a social event. And then the social event is how many reps are you getting when all 4 guys are wanting to rep out the same thing? Unless you've got 4 of the same exercise set up, now you got to take turns, right? And then if Josh is like, I'm going to be a little selfish here, guys. I need about 4 or 5 more repetitions. Now you got me, Dustin, and Ron all sitting around twiddling our thumbs. We're like, would you hurry up? Come on, right? Like, we'd like to have a turn at it too. And that's where having a training partner that doesn't have the same like-mindedness as you can be more problematic than it is, or more detrimental than it is, like, advantageous, right? Because you don't share the same common goals. So there are a lot of times, like, we love to practice together all the time, but we also know that a lot of our actual individual learning occurs when we are spending 2 hours on the range by ourselves, where we get an opportunity to rep things out or to isolate one particular problem.
Yeah, I knew for me, like, I love the practice, and then
But it's a social thing, you're right.
I pick what I fuck up on, and then I come back on a day where I'm here by myself, and that's what I work on. But, like, I love it because
I do that a lot,
you
too.
still, I mean, you get the social aspect, but, like, as soon as you're up on that line, fuck everybody else. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then, you know, take what you can from Kent and Josh.
And this is why matches aren't practice.
Yeah, guys, if you ever think that your match will substitute practice, you need to get rid of that thought process right now. A match is a test, nothing more. It is the test. You are there to evaluate all the practice you have done up to that point.
Both in dry fire and live fire.
Exactly. And really what you're doing is you're testing that idea of automaticity. Can I, under pressure, make these things happen without having to think about it? Because at that point, if I can go to a match, let's say I've made a change to my grip, right? I'm gripping the gun differently. I know when I've married that into my subconscious, because when I show up at a match and I start shooting, it happens. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to constantly refine it. It happens. That tells me that, yes, I have married that skill into my subconscious, and it now belongs to me, right? But if I go to a match and all of a sudden, I mean, we've all seen it. You spend, 3 weeks working on one thing. You're like, yeah, I got it. And you go and the timer goes off and you immediately forget how to grip the gun and all sorts of crazy shit happens. All the stuff you did beforehand pops in. You haven't repped it enough, deliberately enough, in order to marry it into the subconscious yet, right?
Right.
But that's what matches are for, right? And don't get me wrong. If you're like me, I'm there to win, right? But I'm also there to make sure that all the stuff I'm doing in practice, both live and dry fire, does actually belong to me.
Yep.
Right? It's too easy to do one rep of something and be like, yep, I own that skill now. And then you go to a match and it's like, stand by, beep, oh my God, what happened? I didn't see the dot one single time.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? The matches themselves. If you wanted to even just work on gun handling and you're like, you know what? I've dry fired twice this week. That's enough. I'm going to go to the match. That's my practice. But you really have a hard time gripping the gun straight from the holster. How many reps do you typically get at a local match?
6.
Yeah, 5 to 6 reps. And that's if every single stage has you drawing the gun.
Right, loaded it.
If the stage starts with gun is unloaded on a barrel and your magazines are over there, well, now you only got 5 repetitions in drawing the gun. Is that enough to myelinate anything or to build that neural pathway to like, hey, this is the level of grip and this is what the hand speed needs to look? No, God, yeah, right? Yeah, that would be the fix. We'll just shoot more matches. No, that's not true, right? There's got to be a time for you to be able to put some repetition in, to be able to understand and build that pathway, right? That comes with purposeful dry fire and it comes with purposeful live fire. Dry fire is the homework. Live fire is the quiz to validate the homework. The match is the test that you're taking at the end of the quarter, right? So you're kind of equating this to like high school, right? So you've got homework, then you've got the quiz, and then from the quiz, you've got the test, and then you go and shoot a major match. That's the final exam, is all the work that I've been doing to study. The thing about the test, right? Remember taking pre-test in school, right? Before a semester even started, the teacher would throw out a pop quiz or a pre-test. She's pre-testing you or he's pre-testing you on what common knowledge you already have of a study so that they know where to begin that study with the group. Right? So think of the match that way. The match is a way for you to pre-test those things or to kind of pre-test yourself and evaluate what skills do I currently have that I'm employing that are good, and what skills do I currently not possess very well that I need to improve on. So I use the match itself. Local matches for me are a test of the things that I've been doing both in homework and in the pop quizzes, like my live fire at home, to then evaluate, hey, more work is needed on movement. Well, guess what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to go home and then start just working draws and reloads all the time, because those things are already a good maintained skill that I've got myelinated into my pathway, right? But if I'm like, I can't move very well, well, I'm going to spend the time in dry fire and live fire working on movement.
Some good sources of information that expound on what you're talking about are Daniel Coyle.
Yep. The talent code.
Andrews Erickson.
Yep.
We're going to talk about those when we get a little deeper in.
Yep.
Different book selections.
That's one of my favorite books. But that's a huge thing, right? I use my matches to give me an evaluation of the things that I need to practice. They're my roadmap. Ah, man, I'm struggling on partial targets on the move at 15 yards and out. Well, then guess what becomes my next live fire session? I'm going to set partials out there at about 20, 25 yards, and I'm going to be right back here, and I'm going to work on shooting those things on the move over and over and over again. Yep. I'm going to work them at that distance because that's where I struggled. I'm going to fix that struggle so that now I feel 100% confident that, oh yeah, my ability to shoot on the move on a no shoot or a hardcover partial at 15 to 20 yards, I fixed that. And then the next match I go to, I see that. Now I get to test it. Am I doing the thing that I've trained and worked on to fix it? Yep, it's fixed. Great. What else did I struggle on? Ah, man, you know what? My transfer to support hand in that standard stage kind of bit me in the ass a little bit. Well, that's something I can easily work on in dry fire. I don't need to shoot a ton of rounds at it. I don't need to go to live fire range and shoot it over and over and over again. I can fix what the transfer look like and make sure the dot's getting there without ever firing a shot. Great. Now I've navigated or road mapped something to do, and so my matches become like, again, the guidebook for where I take my practice to make my practice more purposeful. It's not just, here's a series of drills and exercises, guys, and just do these 5 or 6 exercises every day, 5 days a week, and go to the range and do these same 5 exercises, once a week at your practice. Then you're going to be a GM shooter. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be able to know where your weaknesses are and where your strengths are, and then adjust your practice to basically kind of accommodate those weaknesses and work them out. That's where the things that you're learning in matches. Sorry, didn't mean to get off on that tangent.
All right, guys, so here's what we need to do. I need you to load up all your magazines. All the magazines. All right? And then meet me at about the 5-yard line once you're ready. Hit the